I think it's important that we're having conversations about how we're spoon-fed conformity at an early age, and that teaches compliance with the things that are going on very, very early. So it makes it very hard for us to disrupt our regular actions of going through the motions. And I want to add on to that conversation by sharing two examples, one fictional and one from real life, that show exactly how this movement toward conformity shapes out in different environments. The first one is from an industry. If you've never watched the show before, it's following a group of grads who are entering this financial institution, and then later on in the later seasons, they follow their different careers. Very general, but enough for you to know what's going on. This is a scene from the induction episode where they're being welcomed into the institution and being told of expectations and standards set out for them. If you notice, the colors chosen for this scene are very cool, very muted. They can all kind of blend together to form a very bleh, grayish background. And I think this perfectly sets the expectation for conformity, because you'll see how everyone else is wearing things that sort of blend into this background. They're popping up as people, but they're not disrupting anything too much to create disruptions in what is expected of them as professional quote unquote individuals. Automatically, this sets the tone that the expectation here is for them to blend in with the background, for them to become one with the institution. And when we zero in on Harper and Yasmin, and we go back to this general photo, we notice that Yasmin is kind of popping out in her neutral pinkish color that sort of blends in with her skin tone, which gives us a hint that because she's of this world, she's perhaps a little bit more comfortable wearing things that stand out, but still she knows enough not to wear for example, jewel tone red or jewel tone green to completely stand out from the crowd. So she knows the rules and she knows how to play by them and still stand out in her individuality a little bit. And in contrast, there's Harper, who is also blending into the background, but if you look, you'll see that she's still wearing her nose ring, which is a symbolism of the outsider identity she holds in this space, right? She went to a non-target school. She doesn't come from a wealthy family. And all of that is communicated by the use of this nose ring that she has on, which becomes instrumental in showcasing that she's transitioning into becoming a pure point person. She's transitioning into this expectation of conformity that they have for all the grads. And this happens when Eric finally notices her, right, as a producer, when she's able to make that trade with Nicole. And he asks her, he finally noticed that she's wearing a nose ring, and he asks her, why do you have that on? And so then she transitions into from being an outsider into blending in with the expectations of the space, and also going above and beyond by playing their game better than they're playing it. Or rather, playing their game better than a lot of people who are of this world, like Yasmin, for example, are playing it. So Harper sets this expectation of conforming, but standing out in a way that ultimately benefits the institution, right? Going above and beyond and becoming or showcasing yourself as being part of the institution, so much so that you're willing to do anything to value what they value, which is ultimately profit. And when we look at Rob and his interactions with the higher-ups, we notice how shame is used in these spaces to maintain that sense of conformity. For example, here he wears that really dark suit and they start going in on him for it. And you'd think that Rob, because he went to college with some of these folks, right? He went to Oxford, that he would by now know the rules. And because he doesn't, shame becomes a mechanism to control his actions or herd him back into formation. I use a specific example because it mirrors so much of the experience we have in corporate America, from the principles of professionalism all the way down to the expectations of what is appropriate to wear. It is all rooted in this need to have us conform to the space, to have us conform to the values of the institution. And because we have been taught that corporate America is the beacon of all stability, we start to embody those traits. We start to become more and more compliant because we don't want to ruffle feathers that could potentially put our stability at risk. And we understand that the cost for that stability we are buying into, or that false sense of stability we are buying into, is our right to be honest about the injustices we see happen to ourselves or even others in that space. A while ago, we were having a conversation on this app about whether or not you would take double the pay but 5 days in office, or have the pay cut in half and stay home 3 days a week. And people couldn't believe why folks wouldn't just take double the pay and stomach the idea of being in office 5 days a week. And I think this is a perfect example of the toll it takes to be surrounded by this kind of mindset, this kind of environment that expects compliance and conformity from you, which ultimately is a demand that you lose yourself in the process. And those values of conformity and compliance only serve an institution and, in a larger view, a society that has granted itself the right to maintain order by any means necessary, through shame or other means. For the real life example, I saw this video of someone swimming in a pool. I think there's like 3 people in the pool. There are some folks standing around, but the majority of people are standing off to the side. And if you've seen this video, you know that there's music playing in the background and no one is dancing. So opposite to the scene in industry where the environment itself is communicating conformity, this environment to me is saying that this is a place for play. Not only the colors, but the outdoor space, the pool, the music playing. This is an invitation to let yourself loose. And yet still, the dominant group who is standing off to the side is dictating what the appropriate quote unquote behavior is in this space. And that appropriate behavior is restraint. And because the people in the pool, mainly the guy who's being highlighted, are not following the rules of the dominant group, right? This restraint, he is being shamed. Look at the caption, bro didn't get the memo in Ibiza. He's being shamed by not following the dominant group's rules. So we come out of those work environments, right? Those corporate environments that dictate that we must conform in a certain way. And we enter these spaces who are, again, constructed so we are playing in them, so we are having fun in them, so we get to dance in them. And we are unable to do that because we have been already indoctrinated in other spaces that even when there's invitation to play, the code of conduct is still restraint. The code of conduct is not doing anything that will ruffle feathers or make yourself stand out. Even if you really want to be in the pool, like, there are people standing on the edges who I know are itching to get in that water but refuse to because they haven't let go of this idea of how they should act, right? They haven't let go of the idea that they must conform. They must do what the dominant group is doing. I say all this to say that there are many ways in which our compliance is demanded even outside of very violent means. And this violence is not new either. Plenty of creators on this app have been talking about how the Black community, right, has been subject to this form of violence for a long time. And people are now just reckoning with it because they now know that they will not be saved. That white supremacy will take everyone down in pursuit of its values, in pursuit of its goals. But we are not conditioned into normalizing that kind of violence overnight. It comes through these scenarios in which we are told, whether through environments or even the dominant group's behavior, how to act. And when we act outside of it, we are shamed or even violated into compliance. And all we really have now is our ability and willingness to disrupt.